Hello there and welcome into Lowcountry Money Talk. We have a lot to discuss today, and as usual, we are joined by Phil Bloyd with Revolutionary Financial Group. So nice to see you.
Glad to be here, Jessa.
Well, we always have a lot to discuss, Phil.
Sure.
We always start out too with some current events. We like to make sure our viewers are informed with what's going on, how it's affecting us, and we can dive into some more details as we roll along in the show. So, unfortunately, current events are not looking a lot better for us. We're dealing with inflation. We're dealing with higher energy prices. We're being told that food costs are going to continue to rise.
Yes. Wow.
So we have to deal with that. We're gonna make sure our retirees who are watching know what to do about those costs.
Sure.
So, let's discuss that. As costs rise, people may need to really start thinking about taking some more income from places.
Right. So
where do they do that?
Typically, Jessa, what we like to think is like, well, maybe I'll just take a little here or there. Maybe this is temporary and we'll get on through it. Well, it looks like maybe it's going to be longer term. So unfortunately with retirees, a lot of times when they're tapped for income, they just go straight to that IRA.
Right. Seems like a logical choice.
Sure. Well, we're told now that, the higher energy prices, not just gas, but also, utilities and all this, could be as much as $5,000 more a year for a family. And then we look at food pricing. I was hearing this morning, it was somewhere around 25% more. So, we've got to eat, we've got to have air conditioning and heat and all these different things. So the thing I want to talk about though is, we spoke about this on a show a while back about distribution planning. And distribution should be, when I'm retired or soon to be retired, I've been doing the accumulation planning, saving for retirement, the funds all these years. Then when I retire, I need to think about, okay, when I need income, where do I take it from?
Right. And you're talking about, maybe the intuition kicks in to take it from the IRA. And that makes sense. We're talking about some significant increases in costs. And if it's, an average of $5,000 a year and you're on a fixed, sort of income and you need more,
sure,
the IRA seems logical. But let's talk this through.
Yeah, well, here's the problem. So let's say I need an extra $8,000 this year for energy and for food. And I've already taken some out of my IRA as the normal income needed would have been. Now I need an additional 8. But the problem, Jess, is when I need 8 from a pre-tax element, whether it's a 401k, IRA, 403b, whatever it may be, I have to consider when I take that dollar out of there that it's going to be taxed.
Right.
So if I need to net $8,000, depending on my tax rates, I may need $10,000 or $11,000. So that's another slap in the face if we look at what this inflation is doing to the average retiree. So instead of just $8,000, now maybe I have to take $11,000. So what I would like people to do is just think about our previous shows a bit and say, hey, distribution planning. Do I have too much in my checking account, my savings account? Remember we said we should have about 6 months expenses in these accounts. So if these accounts are way more than 6 months expenses, instead of taking a withdrawal from my IRA, maybe I should take the withdrawals from those first because those have already been taxed.
Right.
And at least that would save me from the taxes that would be due.
Then the 8,000 is the 8,000 instead of needing to be, to your point, maybe 11 or whatever the number
One other thing
to.
I would like to say though is like that some people say, well, I'll just take it out of my Roth IRA because if I take the distribution from there, maybe it's not taxable. Well, we really, with retirees, especially early retirees, I'm like, I think we need to save that Roth IRA money for later down the road, because the cost of living and, the annual inflation, and normally 10 years from now, everything will cost a lot more. I'd rather save the Roth for then. But if I'm already down that road and, maybe I'm in my 80s, maybe the Roth distribution does make sense.
Sure. Well, and that's where everyone, it's so individualized. So talking to an expert obviously makes a big difference. Okay, we've got more expert advice for you after the break. In fact, we're going to tackle some legislative changes that are coming up. Be thinking the Secure Act 2.0. That's next. Hello, welcome back in now to Lowcountry Money Talk. I'm Jessa Jeremiah, and we are joined by Phil Bloyd, who's our friend and expert with Revolutionary Financial Group, covering some current events and, boy, a lot of changes too. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So we covered some of the current events, which of course we're battling inflation and rising costs really across the board, and really sharing with our viewers, especially those who are in retirement, how to handle that, where to get the extra money from. To really, continue to educate our viewers, we're going to be really unpacking the Secure Act and some of these changes. I would love for you to really boil this down for us.
Okay. Hey, got to keep changing things, right? So,
yes.
Recently we had spoken about how the Secure Act, it took action. Let's see, I think it was 2019 when it came about. It changed the required minimum distribution age to 72. Also made some changes for beneficiaries on IRAs and qualified plans. They've been tossing around even more changes for the beneficiaries, so we spoke about that a bit a while back. Now, not that that's enough, they're looking at a total 2.0 plan, and it looks like it's got some pretty good bipartisan support, so it may be getting through. But this is some major changes, and it can confuse some of our retirees. So.
Well, you know what? Anytime there's changes, I think taking a minute to really sort of dial it down for us is helpful.
Sure.
So what are we really talking about here?
Okay, so the first thing we'll say, Jessa, is it hasn't passed yet.
Okay.
So this is preliminary. So when it does pass, we'll have that on the show and we'll go exactly.
Okay.
But just so people, I'm already getting calls about this,
right.
Believe it or not.
Even as a potential for
right.
change, yes.
Yeah, I've had people say, well, see, I don't have to take a distribution then until I'm 75 now. Well, the 75, I think, they're etching it up a bit, so that's not till 2032.
So this is a tiered plan,
right.
essentially.
So basically, here's some of the main things. There's some, if you're still working and you work for a company that has over 11 employees, there's some issues with some 401k mandates and making the employer provide that for employees. Most of our viewers are probably retired. The catch-up of provisions. So if I'm over 50, there's catch-up provisions. Well, they're going to extend those. So if I'm 62 to 64 and still working, they're going to move that up quite a bit from $6,500 maybe to $10,000 a year, where I can contribute more into these plans.
Okay.
So that's probably a good thing there. When we look at the required minimum distribution, that's where most of our viewers, they're interested in that because.
Yes. Well, because there's some potential downside, it sounds like. So let's maybe walk us through that.
So the first thing with the changes is they're looking to get from 72, starting your mandatory distributions, moving that age up to 75 over time. And they're looking at 73 as of this year. So
really?
Some people, 72, have probably already taken their distribution and maybe they wouldn't have had to.
It's interesting that they can make that change in a current year.
Right. I would have thought they would have done it the next year.
Right. Me as
But
well.
Nothing in Washington makes much sense these days.
Yeah.
They didn't ask me.
They didn't ask
And they didn't ask you.
Going forward, we would like it
Please
to be
give
discussed.
us a call on this, right? So 73 potentially for 2022, 74 2029, and 75 in 2032. So it really will be important that you keep in touch with your custodians, your advisors, because when this goes through, a lot of people are going to say, well, I don't have to take it till 75, and then they're going to get hit with that penalty. And we'll talk about the downsides. We might go into even the next segment, but let's talk about the penalty real quick first.
Right.
So currently, if I miss a required minimum distribution, the penalty is one of the harshest in the tax code, 50%.
That is, ouch.
So if I was supposed to take
that.
$10,000, they're going to hit me with a $5,000 penalty.
Wow.
And guess what? They're going to make me take the 10 anyway,
You're going to take it anyway and get penalized.
Well, the good part of this is they're looking to pull back on that to maybe as low as 10% on that penalty.
Wow, that's a big change.
If you catch it on your own, or maybe 25% if you don't catch it at all. But if you catch it and say, oh, whoops, I forgot 10. So that would be a pretty good change.
That'd be a great change.
Yeah, we'll talk about the downside a little bit more.
Okay, so you have downside to look forward to, but at least
Please
we'll
tune
educate
in
you.
for the downside, right?
That'll be next. So we hope you stick with us here on Lowcountry Money Talk. Okay, as promised, we're about to tell you about the downside to some of the changes we've been chatting about. If you're just tuning in, this is Lowcountry Money Talk. Phil Bloyd is here unpacking the Secure Act 2.0 with us right now. Thank you.
Get ahead of it.
Get ahead of it.
Yes.
So we walked us through some of the potential changes, and again, this hasn't passed yet, so we're just sort of walking through what is included should this pass. And one of the things we keyed you up for here on the break is really talking about the downside. We got to talk about that because we want to unpack the penalties, what this exactly might mean.
Sure, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you.
You're here to,
You know, you ever heard that? So usually when there's a carrot, there's a stick, you know, so we'll look for the stick a little bit here. But we mentioned, what was it we were talking about before? We were talking about the penalty.
Yeah.
Of 50% if we miss the distribution. So then they said, okay, and this maybe what we'll do is if you miss it all together, maybe we'll lower it to 25%. But maybe if you catch it on your own pretty quickly, you know, we'll do 10%.
Right. So some good changes,
things,
really.
You know.
Less
You can
penalties.
always write letters, but you know, the thing is, if I'm a senior and you know, I could be sick, I could be waiting to take my distribution till the end of the year. And I could have a hospitalization or, you know, hurt my hip or whatever and be in rehab and miss my whole distribution.
Yeah.
So the first thing, if that happened to me, I would write a letter and say, hey, you know, please forgive me, I was sick or something. You know, may or may not work. But, you know, a lot of times not to be afraid of the IRS. If you write them a letter and explain, and they can see this is not a pattern, you know, they may be a little forgiving to say.
Sure, yeah, especially if you're, you know, fessing up, right, and recognizing the mistake.
You know, life happens.
Right.
But that penalty is one thing I think that would be really good to get that square because that is very harsh.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it really is. So a change, I think, would be good. So now let's talk a little bit about, you know, how does this exactly work? So usually the RMDs are based on age, ratio, life expectancy, and I don't really understand exactly how this plays into the changes here. Well,
you know, I'm a little worried about that. So they put out a table and they say, okay, this is how much you have to take out. You get a fair market value. We've spoken about that on the show before. The fair market value is the value of your account the year before, December 31st, and there's a ratio based upon your age you can divide or you can multiply, and it says this is how much you have to take out. So the thought would be is if I don't have to take out till 75, I don't have as many years to average that out. So I would think that the distribution may be higher as a ratio of the overall account.
Okay, yeah, no, that.
So we have to, it didn't happen that way last time, but that's one of the concerns here. Because if I'm mandated to take out more and they raise that ratio up, guess what? It can affect the taxation on my Social Security.
Okay, so there's a whole other topic. Let's discuss that. How would it affect Social Security, maybe Medicare?
Well, it could cause me to have to take a larger amount, or let's put it like this, it could cause me to pay taxes on a larger amount of my Social Security because up to 85% of my Social Security may be taxable. So this, if I was at maybe 50%, this, if I'm taking more, it could push me up.
Right. So
that's one concern. And so then I would actually be paying more in taxes, right? If I have to take out a larger distribution, I'll have to pay more taxes on that. Could cause the taxes on my Social Security to be more. And then maybe I have some problems with my Medicare premium as well.
Wow. So it's interesting how, you know, these changes really, there's a ripple effect here. There's one thing plays into the next, and, you know, for many, it's sort of difficult to navigate and really deciding what to do.
It's getting more confusing, Jessa. So again, more things to keep up with. And the problem is many of these custodians of these plans have fewer employees now.
Right, yes.
And they're already backed up. So I could see maybe some errors, so we really need to stay on top of it.
Right, absolutely. Well, if that does pass, we'll have you back again, you know, to really talk this through and in more detail. But you're in luck. We have another segment of Lowcountry Money Talk after this break, and we hope you'll stick around. Okay, we're back here on Lowcountry Money Talk, and really a lot of great information so far coming from expert Phil Bloyd as we navigate some of the changes happening and some current events, of course. So we've got one segment left. This is where I'm going to really take out the R word and talk about recession, because we are using that word a little bit here lately, wondering if it is going to happen. So what's your take? Do you believe we're going to enter an economic recession?
A little tricky. So, the ideal, Jessa, would be to deal with the inflation problem, raise interest rates. The question is, will the Federal Reserve, will they raise rates too quickly or mess anything up? Not that they missed inflation at all, right?
Right.
Transitory, remember that word?
Transitory, I do, yeah.
It's not one we use every day. When we were originally told that the inflation was transitory, I think the Fed messed up on that one a bit. Now we're trusting them to make sure that they do the interest rate hikes properly.
Right.
And so the first hike, they came out with 25 basis points, which is basically 1/4%. And people are like, that's kind of low because we need to probably move up a lot faster. Then within a week's time, they came right back out and said, well, we're going to go up 50 basis points the next several times. And it's like, well, why didn't you do it the first time? I don't know. So I don't have a lot of confidence in that.
Right.
And, if they get it wrong, and a lot of people are saying, do we go ahead and deal with the inflation problem and sacrifice a recession to that? So we have a recession. What's more important, I guess?
Right. Well, that, I guess, is sort of the balancing act here. Can you stop inflation without causing the recession? Is it too late at this point? Did we miss the timing?
I mean,
we don't know, I suppose.
So the relief of inflation is to lower the interest. We have to raise the interest rates, in essence, to lower them to stimulate off a recession. So we have to raise interest rates to stop